Well, in this video, I wanted to make you aware that while I had previously, a few years ago, I think, recited the verses by the Dharma master Tan Luan regarding his aspiration for birth in the Pure Land and his praises of Amida Buddha, I am in the near term future going to re-recite those from a different translation, namely the translation from the Shin Buddhism Translation Series, which is a wonderful series of small paperback books that cover doctrine and writings from all the various Dharma masters within the Jodo Shinshu lineage. And of course, Tan Luan was one of those Dharma masters that Shinran identified. There were 7 of them. And the thing about it is that he probably relied upon Tan Luan's commentaries and writings more than any other of the Dharma masters. So, as I understand it, what Tan Luan did in essence was to somehow find a way to integrate the teachings of Nagarjuna from the so-called Madhyamika school, where the emphasis was on emptiness or shunyata, with the teachings of Vasubandhu, who was from the Yogacara tradition and focused more on a mind-only kind of ideology or way of conceptualizing Buddhism. So anyway, that being said, in the first part of his commentary on Vasubandhu's treatise on the Sutra of the Buddha of Immeasurable Life with the verses of aspiration for birth in the Pure Land, Tan Luan honors Nagarjuna by essentially quoting or paraphrasing him in what amounts to the first paragraph, where he says, "I find there are 2 paths by which bodhisattvas seek the stage of non-retrogression, the path of difficult practice and the path of easy practice." So here, with Nagarjuna being essentially the first patriarch of Shin Buddhism, we have an articulation of this differentiation between a difficult path and an easy path. But again, the thrust of this commentary is on Vasubandhu's treatise. So in a sense, I think he is trying to integrate from those 2 great Indian Dharma masters. But again, what I will be focusing on in my upcoming recitation will be Tan Luan's own verses, which are called Gathas and Praise of Amida Buddha. And in the second paragraph, what he says is this: "The Dharma body's wheel of light shines universally on the blind and ignorant of the world." And of course, blind and ignorant, we Jodo Shinshuists feel that we are filled with blind passions. We are ignorant in the sense that we don't have a full appreciation of the true nature of reality because we're incapable of that kind of insight or so-called enlightenment. But what's interesting to me about this is he uses the term Dharma body. And again, I had been typically thinking of Dharma body as the Dharmakaya within the 3-body doctrine, where the Dharmakaya, or law body or truth body, is the level of Buddhahood that we can't really say anything about. So how is it that we can speak of the Dharma body's wheel of light? Of course, the light of Buddha shines universally on the blind and ignorant. In other words, Buddhism is a universal system of salvation, and the light does not discriminate between people young and old, people knowledgeable or not, etc., etc. But what about this idea of the Dharma body having the characteristic or attribute of light? Well, the answer to that is found in the glossary, actually, of this little gem of a book, where it says Dharma body can be viewed from 2 aspects of Dharma body of suchness and Dharma body as compassionate means. So I've traditionally thought of light representing wisdom or prajna, and the Buddha's infinite life, or his life of an indeterminate length, representing compassion in the sense that he maintains in the world for us as a source of comfort and as a source of salvation in the context of the power of his primal vow, namely Amida Buddha. But here we have reference to the Dharma body as compassionate means. So it makes sense, really, that the Dharmakaya, or the law body, or the truth body, in the context of it being the Dharma body of suchness, suchness being kind of the flip side of emptiness or shunyata, expressed in a more positive way, that also from that Dharma body of suchness would be a Dharma body of compassionate means. And of course, compassionate means also means expedient means or tactfulness. This is again the teaching of the second chapter of the Lotus Sutra. But just to go on a little bit about this, is that the Dharma body of suchness is the reality of the Absolute. It is formless and nameless. So there again, we can't characterize it with any particular concepts or human dualistic ideas or theories or concepts or ways of thinking, because thinking is dualistic. So it is formless and nameless. It has no knowable material, and it transcends the capacity of discriminated thinking, which is how our brain works. Our brain works by definition in terms of discrimination between this versus that. So it has no knowable material and transcends the capacity of discriminative thinking, whereby sentient beings are not able to apprehend nor understand it. So we can't understand or really have any way of talking about the Dharmakaya other than just put a label on it and say that it's what the Baha'is call the ineffable essence. But this Dharma body, okay, makes itself known to us in the form of Dharma body as compassionate means. And how is that defined, at least within this particular definition? And I have, by the way, heard Reverend Takata at the West LA Buddhist Temple speak of the Dharma body of suchness as compared to the Dharma body of compassionate means. But I just wasn't tuned in to a sufficient degree as to the nuance of this differentiation. So the Dharma body makes itself known to us in the form of Dharma body as compassionate means. That is, the primal vow expounding the name of Amida Buddha and the story of Bodhisattva Dharmakara in the larger sutra. Birth that is made possible by the power of the primal vow transcends all forms of distinction and discrimination, and therefore all who are born there are equal. So the compassionate means that's exercised by the Dharmakaya is Amida's primal vow. That is how we, at least in Jodo Shinshu, think of the expression of it. But of course, in a broader sense, compassionate means, by definition, is geared toward the psychological and spiritual needs and attributes and characteristics of any particular individual. It just so happens that within Jodo Shinshu, we view it and experience it and describe it in the context of the narrative from the larger sutra on the Sukhavati, the Pure Land Sutra. So back to the verse, the Dharma body's wheel of light shines universally on the blind and ignorant of the world. So I want to focus some on this light, this wheel of light, that again, now I understand is not being asserted to be an attribute of the Dharma body of suchness, but rather it is being manifested by the Dharma body of compassionate means in the form of light. And of course, what is Amida's name? Amitabha means Buddha of infinite light, which again is a way of expressing wisdom, which is prajna or shunyata or emptiness. And that light is shined upon us, again, for us who have limited capacities, in the form of the narrative regarding Dharmakara and Amida. But just to focus then on Amida's light and name, the unhindered light, which is the manifestation of Amida's wisdom, shines throughout the worlds of the 10 quarters and dispels the darkness of ignorance and of sentient beings. The name of Amida is the expression of the working of this light. So, again, at least the way we think about it in our Shin Buddhist narrative, and different religions and different, frankly, forms of Buddhism may think about this in different ways, because once it is showing itself as compassionate means, by definition, it's adapting to our particular sort of idiosyncratic, maybe, way of conceptualizing or thinking about the divine, if you will. Although, again, I think to the extent that we conform to the parameters of a particular lineage or tradition, I think that makes it less likely that we're going to go off the rails in terms of some kind of direction of a truly delusional idea, or an idea that may have to do more with mental health than religious spirituality. So anyway, we have this light, and how does Tan Luan talk about the light in these verses? Let me give you a few examples, and you can see the emphasis that he places on this light of Amitabha, or the light of the Buddha more generally. The light of wisdom exceeds all measure. Therefore, we also call the Buddha immeasurable light. And I've said before, I love the term inconceivable, and immeasurable is another term, that we can speak of the light, but at the end of the day, the light is immeasurable. Oh, and one other thing I have to tell you relative to these two aspects of Dharma body is that the two aspects of Dharma body, suchness and compassionate means, are inseparable. So we don't want to get the idea when we're talking about this as, again, a form of dualism, another form of dualism, just as the Dharmakaya, or law body, or truth body, or Dharma body is not inseparable from the Sambhogakaya or the Nirmanakaya, namely the spiritual level Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or the form bodies who manifest in human form, that in the same way the Dharma body of suchness is not separate from the Dharma body of compassionate means. It's just that these are two aspects of a non-dual reality. But back to Tan Luan and the notion of light. The light of wisdom exceeds all measure, therefore we also call the Buddha immeasurable light. So it's our natural tendency as humans to want to personify truth or reality. And so how do we do that? Well, within Buddhism, we do it in the form of the Buddha, okay? And how shall we call the Buddha's name? What shall we call him or her? Is that, in this case, we call the Buddha immeasurable light. Well, what else do we call him? The liberating wheel of light is without bound, and so we call the Buddha boundless light. Very similar to immeasurable. It's boundless. There are no boundaries. It can't be contained by any human concepts or theories or ideas or doctrine. The Buddha's light is beyond compare. The light of purity is beyond compare. Therefore, we call the Buddha unequaled light. Unequaled. There's no comparison with anything. The Buddha's light is supreme in radiance. Therefore, we call the Buddha Lord of blazing light. So we're just emphasizing this notion that the wisdom, and let me take it to this idea, the prajna, the light, the wisdom, this blazing light also is related, I believe, to Buddha nature. It's saying Buddha is called immeasurable light, boundless light, unequaled light. Well, do we have the potential to become Buddha? We all do, I would say, in the sense that we all have the Buddha nature. Now, unfortunately, that's so clouded by the ignorance and limitations within 99.9% of us that we can't really get in touch with that or manifest it in a fully flowering form in this lifetime. But, you have to believe, I think, that we have the capability. Why? Because we saw it manifested in the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, for one thing. And there probably also have been other examples in human history where that Buddha nature has become manifest in a beautiful way. The radiance of enlightenment in its brilliance transcends all limits. Therefore we call the Buddha light of purity. And here he's talking about the radiance of enlightenment. It gets back to the fact that the goal of all Buddhists is to become a Buddha, to attain enlightenment, to experience that light, not only within oneself, but all around oneself. It's like Huxley says in the Perennial Philosophy, that this divine is both immanent and external to us. It's, if we want to think in dualistic terms, it surrounds us and is within us at the same time in some kind of mysterious, paradoxical way. The light of compassion, Dharma body of compassionate means, the light of compassion illuminates us from afar, bestowing peace and bliss. Therefore we call the Buddha light of joy. The Buddha's light well dispels the darkness of ignorance. Therefore we call the Buddha light of wisdom. And I'll give you one more. The light shines everywhere ceaselessly. Therefore we call the Buddha uninterrupted light. So even though we're not always aware of the light, it is shining on us. And this is the main function, I think, of the Buddha, is essentially to be a teacher to us, that the form that the light takes is often in terms of the doctrine, the Buddhist teachings. And that's why, again, as Shin Buddhists, our job, so to speak, is to hear the teaching and to trust in the Buddha, in the sense that we feel assured that that light includes us, and that by virtue of our entrustment we are embraced, never to be forsaken, and that we have achieved a state, so to speak, of non-retrogression. So I just want to go to the very end of his gathas, or verses, and indicate his statement sort of in the first person, which certainly I can relate to in a very meaningful and deep way. In verse 49, where he says, I have been wandering in the three worlds since the beginningless past, turning on the wheel of falsity. The karma that I commit every moment, every instant, is a step bound to the 6 courses, so that I stay in the 3 evil realms. May the compassionate light protect me and keep me from losing the mind aspiring for enlightenment. May my voice praising the Buddha's wisdom and virtue be heard by anyone in the 10 quarters whom I may know. And may those who aspire for birth in the land of peace and happiness all, everywhere, have their hindrances dispersed as they desire. My merits I have gained, both great and small, I give to all beings, so that we will be born together. Entrusting myself to Amida, the inconceivable light, I single-heartedly bow my head and pay homage to the Buddha. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu. Namo Amida Butsu.